short stories. My ass.
Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer.
So for this video, I will be doing a quick discussion about Nightmares and Dreamscapes, which is the third Stephen King short story collection, and it's the one that we've been reading for the Stephen King Short Story Book Club. So this video is going to be a bit different than the Night Shift and Skeleton Crew discussions that I had, which, we've read previously for the Stephen King Short Story Book Club. For those, I actually went and ranked all of the short stories, but for this one, Nightmares and Dreamscapes, it's not worth it for me, just because a lot of these stories are either just bad, or they're too long and boring, or they're just not very memorable. So it's not really worth me, going from the bottom and saying, this one wasn't good, and then finally getting to the ones that are actually good. So instead, I'm just I'm going to just give my general thoughts about it, kind of talk about what my absolute least favorite are in the collection, what my absolute favorite are in the collection, and then go from there. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So like I said, Nightmares and Dreamscapes is Stephen King's third short story collection after Night Shift and Skeleton Crew. And Night Shift is just one of my all-time favorite short story collections, not even from King, just from anybody. I loved it. And Skeleton Crew was pretty good. It had some duds, but overall it was very good. For this one, even though it's a short story collection, it's a friggin' chunker. This book is almost 700 pages, and it has only slightly more short stories than Night Shift and Skeleton Crew. So the stories are just getting longer and longer and even more meandering. So a lot of these stories just don't work for me, just for the fact that it takes so long to get to the actual premise, or so long to actually get to something interesting. King is just rambling and rambling for a lot of this, and quite frankly, the collection just suffers because of it. That's not to say that there's not moments of brilliance in this collection. There are some really good short stories in here, and then there's some short stories that while they take a long time to get to, there's actually is some good stuff in here. But overall, I would say that this is by far my least favorite short story collection from King. It's not very good. I think the first time I read it, I gave it 2 stars. I was pretty brutal. I think the second time I'm going to lean more towards 2.5, just because I did find that there were a few more in here that I gravitated to more. But overall, most of this collection is just not for me. I know a lot of people in the short story book club that we've been doing for the Stephen King short story collections, they actually really enjoyed this collection, which I found surprising. I thought a lot of people would hate it just like I did, but a lot of people have been enjoying most, if not all, of the short stories in here. So I'm glad that people are enjoying it a lot more than I did. I just feel like Stephen King has much better collections. And actually, the one that we're going to be starting in January is Everything's Eventual. I don't have the schedule ready for it yet, but if you are interested in joining the Stephen King Short Story Book Club, we will be starting this probably sometime in mid-January. And if you don't know how the Short Story Book Club works, we're basically going to read 1 to 2 short stories a week, take our time with it, and, it'll be fun. And I think this one only has 14. A few of them are novellas, but I think it'll go by much more quickly and much more efficiently than Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Everything Eventual is not the best, but there's some really good stuff in this one. So I'm definitely excited to see what you guys think of it. Now back to Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Like I said, there are some really good ones in here. Let me go ahead and quickly talk about those. So it starts out with Dolan's Cadillac, which is actually a novella. It's one of those weird novellas that, novellas can sometimes be tricky. King is usually great at like plotting out a novella and making it like novella worthy in my mind. Sometimes though, he either should have made it a short story and just kind of condensed it into like its raw form, or he should have enhanced it or lengthened it into like a short novel to like flesh out everything. For this one, it was kind of like that weird middle where it didn't really work for me for a lot of it, but it did have some great moments of brilliance, and it is a pretty good revenge tale. I just wish he would have either condensed it into a short story or lengthened it into a short novel. But for what it is, it's pretty good. And then you have The End of the Whole Mess, which is actually probably my second favorite in the collection. It's kind of hard to talk about because you don't want to spoil it, but it did remind me a little bit of Flowers for Algernon. So if you've read that book, you can probably kind of tell like what direction it would go in. But yeah, I really enjoyed that short story. And then you've got my all-time favorite in this collection, which was still my favorite from the last time I read it, called Suffer the Little Children. Now, this one is just like classic Stephen King short story. And actually, if you look up, about the short story, he actually wrote this during the time Night Shift was coming out. And it was actually supposed to be in Night Shift, but I think his editors took it out so that he could put in gray matter or something like that. So Suffer the Little Children is definitely like a classic Stephen King horror short story. And it's by far my favorite in the collection. I love it a lot. And then after that, you've got The Night Flyer and Popsy, which are kind of connected in a way. And I wish that Stephen King wouldn't have put them back to back. I think Popsy, which follows The Night Flyer, it would have been more effective if it would have been like later on in the collection, because the reveal of what happens at the end of Popsy, you're like, okay, well, this happened just after Night Shift, so clearly this is happening. I think it would have been much more effective if it would have came a little later on in the collection, and it would have taken us by surprise. But yeah, both of those are very good. The Night Flyer takes a little bit of time getting into, but the ending is one of the better Stephen King short story endings. So The Night Flyer and Popsy are pretty good. So those are the first 5 stories, and I think that's kind of the high point for this collection. After that, it's not that great. You've got It Grows on You, which one of the worst in the collection, especially compared to the first 5 stories in here. It's super boring. I don't even really remember it that much. And then you've got Chattery Teeth, which I don't love when Stephen King takes inanimate objects and like brings them to life to like make them scary. He did the same thing in Skeleton Crew with the monkey, which it was fine, but it's just not that scary. I know people find that kind of stuff scary, but for me, I just think it's silly. And this one, it's Chattery Teeth, so you can kind of tell where the story would go. It's so stupid, but it is narrated by Kathy Bates, which does help. And that's another thing with this collection, is that a lot of the stories in here are narrated by like really famous actors or famous people. So you've got like Whoopi Goldberg, and you've got Tim Curry narrating a few short stories in here. You've got King himself, of course, narrating a few, which he's not that great. And then I'll try to remember some as we get further on into the collection here. But yeah, Kathy Bates does do a good job, at least with that one, even though it is silly. We've got Dedication, which is fine. The Moving Finger, which is pretty good. Sneakers is another weird one. They Got a Hell of a Band could have been a really good short story if it wasn't 40 pages long in this tiny ass text. I think if you would have gotten to the point sooner, it would have been a much better short story, which goes for a lot of these quote unquote short stories. Home Delivery, I'm blanking on what that one's even about. Rainy Season is hilarious. The story itself isn't that good, but it's narrated by this person. I can't remember their name, but they actually do the voice of Lisa Simpson. So if you listen to the audiobook, it's basically just Lisa Simpson narrating a horror short story, which is hilarious. So even though the story isn't that good, it's just a fun listen just for that. My Pretty Pony was super boring. I did not like that one. Sorry, Right Number, I believe that's the one with the full cast narration. That one was fine, but a little forgettable. The 10 o'clock people is very long, very drawn out. I think a lot of people ended up liking it in the book club, but for me, it's like 50 pages and it just goes on and on. Like, yeah. Crouch End, narrated by Tim Curry, who does an excellent job, of course. But the story itself is a little bit Lovecraftian, which I'm not a huge fan of Lovecraftian stuff in fiction, so it was kind of meh, even though Tim Curry did do an excellent job. The House on Maple Street, good. The Fifth Quarter, good. The Doctor's Case, I think that one's narrated by Tim Curry too. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's like a Sherlock Holmes Watson kind of tale, which I'm not the biggest fan of Sherlock Holmes, so that one's kind of meh. Omni's Last Case is fine. And then, of course, we end with Head Down, which is a 40-page Little League Baseball essay. Who asked for that? I don't know, but I refused to read it a second time. I read it the first time and thought it was boring as hell, so I knew I was not going to like it a second time, so I just skipped over that. And then, of course, we end with Brooklyn August, which is a Stephen King poem, which I don't think people generally like Stephen King poems, so why does he keep doing it? I don't know, but I don't like it. And then, yeah, that's it. So the collection admittedly does start out pretty good. Like 5 pretty good and great short stories back to back to back to back to back. And then after that, it kind of falls off a cliff. Most of them are either forgettable or just fine or just bad. So for me, it's still definitely my least favorite Stephen King collection. And yeah, we're going to be moving on from that because we finished that in December. And like I said, if anyone is interested in joining the Stephen King Short Story Book Club in January, we will be starting Everything's Eventual, which in my mind is a big improvement on Nightmares and Dreamscapes. All right, so what did you guys think of my discussion for Nightmares and Dreamscapes? Do you agree with me in that it's his worst collection, or do you disagree with me and think that you love Nightmares and Dreamscapes and what the hell am I talking about? Either way, leave your lovely comments down in the comments below. And of course, thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already, go subscribe to this channel. Go subscribe to Bookish Drummer Discord. If you want to go support me financially, go check out my Patreon page. And I have my Amazon wishlist if anyone would like to buy me a book. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a fantastic day.